Attractions Theater, so we've got the Fun Center, the theater, and one in Kenai, the Fun Center Theater there. I just wanted to welcome you guys. Appreciate you coming out. The theater's back open, in case you didn't know. Yep. No first-run movies, but we got 2 new releases this week. Unhinged next week, just a little commercial going. The bar's open across the street if you want to have a libation after, just so you know. It's kind of, but a couple housekeeping, fire exit over here. You got the exit where you came in. So we appreciate this. You guys are the heartbeat. You guys are going to make this happen. One thing I would like to ask you guys is, the elected officials, is what are you guys going to do to help this turn this economy around? Small businesses are suffering left and right. Every one of their members are suffering. So I want you to think about that. Not one of your questions. So thank you for coming. Enjoy the evening. We appreciate it.
And special thanks to Fine Attractions Theater and the Extreme Fun Center. You guys do so much, not only for the Chamber, but for this community. So thanks for being the great host and allowing us this beautiful venue. Thanks, Marty. Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Esty. I am with Matanuska Electric Association. I'm also on the Chamber Board and the chair of the Government Affairs Committee. So just wanted to say thank you all for coming and participating in this important discussion, and also to say thank you to Jessica for organizing this with the Chamber and being able to put it on live stream for anybody who either wants to watch it now or later. We're really very interested as a Chamber in the outcome of this next election and the future of our local economy and our local community, and so we really appreciate each of the candidates coming to take time to speak to us, as well as each of our community members coming to be involved. So, as Jessica explained to many of you, the format is fun and new. So what has happened now is that each of the candidates has drawn a number, and that number corresponds to a question that they received earlier this week. They received a list of questions, so now they have received a number that corresponds to one of those questions. So each of them will come up and have 2 minutes, Jessica? 2 minutes. 2 minutes to respond to the question that I asked them. Each of the candidates will come up in turn. We'll go by each seat, so we're going to start with Senate Seat D first. And then after everybody has had a chance to answer their question, each candidate will come back up in a different order this time because they rolled a die. And so they'll come up in a different order, and they have the choice to either, one, respond to a different question that maybe they didn't get asked but they would like to respond to, or 2, they can rebut somebody else's comments that were made during their 2 minutes. So that is the format of this debate. We're trying to do it as much as possible, allowing for the proper distancing, and at least a format with so many candidates that people can have their voices heard, but also have a chance to have a little bit of dialogue and back and forth. So with that, we'll get started. Any questions? It sounds like we're missing maybe a thunderstorm outside, which is rare. I'm a little upset. This is the comments in here will be much more interesting, I'm sure. All right, so our first candidate for Senate Seat D is Stephen Wright.
I thought I was second.
And technically you were second, but nobody did first, so. And use that microphone. Again, we're trying not to touch the microphone. If you'd like to sanitize the microphone, you're welcome to. So, Mr. Wright, your question is, many businesses and individuals in our community are still struggling to return to a version of normalcy due to COVID. What do you see as the legislature's role in helping Alaskans get back to business and ensure continued prosperity for the state?
Okay, so when we're talking COVID, I think it's important that everybody has skin in the game, especially the private sector seems to be getting doubled down and really kicked in the teeth. So I think it's very important that that if we shut down any sector in the private sector, we also need to shut down a sector in the public sector that's equivalent. So, and there has to be skin in the game because you can't just have one sector doubling down on the other sector and keeping that keeping that sector held down. So we can see this with all the different mandates and things that have happened. So to answer the question, the legislature's role in helping would be to make sure that the mandates, the legal mandates, are actually viable. I mean, we could consider a lot of different things as far as safety and health, and I think that's the main concern, is making sure that like in Alaska, our numbers are the lowest in the country. So for us to be open and for our economy to be running well with precautions, I think it's something that we have to consider and something that has to be done. And that's an important thing as far as that goes. Okay, and that's important, is to protect the private sector and not just to beat it down. So that would be my answer to that question.
Great, thank you, Mr. Wright. And I forgot to mention to the candidates, so there is going to be a timer here. Chandra, you want to raise your hand? And she is showing you when you have both 60 seconds and then 30 seconds remaining. So thank you for doing that. All right, so our next candidate coming up is Chandra McCabe Finch. You should be playing music or something, but next time we'll have music. All right, so you're going to be responding to question 3, which is, Kinnick Goose Bay Road is listed as the most dangerous road in the state. An approved plan and funding is in place for upgrades to this road. However, the project keeps getting postponed. Explain your philosophy for ensuring completion of projects which are funded and ready to proceed.
This one is actually a little easier for me. I used to live out Kinnick Goose Bay Road when I first moved here. I've been here about 14 years. And the road has sequentially gotten worse and worse and worse. And this year, I know that we've had many issues with it, with the ruts and everything else. I do know that it was funded in 2019, and that there has been massive debate about this road for years. So my concern is, after looking at the plans and the projects, it's not going to be completed until 2025. That's a long time. My question is, with our civil engineering system and all of the people that we have working on these projects, once the funding is in place and we have done our 6 months of project, 6 months of our project calculations and all of our informational gathering, why is it taking 5 and 6 years to complete the projects in stages? We're also looking at the same thing out towards Big Lake. We just finished the Wasilla Highway. All of these things have been in the works for 2, 3, 5, 10 years, some of them. So what we need to do is make sure that our engineering departments are working harder, faster, and once we have the money there and everything's already set aside, these people need to have everything ready to go. We need to make sure that the people that are putting in our bids to do these are proper, and that everything is moved along immediately. There's no reason and there's no excuse for more lives to be lost on any of these roads for any reason.
Thank you. All right, our next candidate is Senator David Wilson. Senator, you're going to be answering question 4, which is, if elected, what specifically is the top economic development project in our community that you will support or promote that will create jobs and promote prosperity for our businesses and community?
Thank you. I think that's pretty much what we answered last forum. There are actually 4 projects that will bring economic prosperity to the Manatee Valley. First one is obviously the bridge, the second one, the port, third one is rail spur connection, and the fourth one, I think, is probably the most important one, is the Sinawatana Dam. That will provide construction jobs, it will provide the infrastructure to power, to lower the utilities throughout the entire rail belt. and thus bring more jobs, because industry, that's one of the largest complaints, is that the cost of energy is so high, a kilowatt hour here, double than what it is in lower 48 in some similar sized communities, as through Anchorage, Matsu, Fairbanks. And if you're able to lower the cost of energy, we're going to be able to provide those type of manufacturing places. Matsu Borough has 14 square miles out in Point Mac that's just ready for industrial use. And having the bridge and the rail spur to connect those resources to folks in the lower 48 to the Asian markets, having the port there to help drive that, and having infrastructure there, I think all four of those will provide a well economic use. And obviously, as one of my other constituents going to poke me about, I mentioned the airport apron expansion out here in Wasilla as well. And so with that, I think those are the projects that will help provide economic development in terms of jobs, resources, and lower cost of energy, which will also help the folks here in Matsu as well.
Thank you. All right, our next candidate is Bernadette B. Rupright. Welcome. And you will be answering question 5. Growth and economic development is limited by a lack of infrastructure, access to energy, telecommunications, transportation corridors, etc. The Matsu Borough posted a 17% cumulative growth rate from 2010 through 2017. What Matsu Borough-based forward-thinking projects will you be championing during your term?
Well, thank you. I think this is a pretty easy one to answer, because once again, what happens in our state quite often, there have been great ideas but not implemented. So we need a new sewer water treatment plant. We need to look at our aquifers. We need to make sure that they are stable, and because we need that fresh water. We have a lot of growth here. And we also need a dump station. That's also good for business also. So we don't have to go but the driver comes, it's kind of hard to answer this question because we need that energy first. And we already talked about that. We need the roads built, and we need our infrastructure designed so that we can grow. But the big projects to help us as to handle that growth are the roads, dump stations, sewer, and water.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, our next candidate up is Huhnkie. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Huhnkie Lee, come on in. All right, you will be answering question number 6. Article 10 of the Alaska Constitution provides for maximum local self-government and says a liberal construction shall be given to the powers of local government. However, access points to alcohol, for instance liquor licenses, are regulated by the state without regard for local governments. Should first-class and home rule cities, which have active and effective enforcement capabilities, have regulatory authority over access to alcohol?
Thank you everybody for attendance, and thank you very much for the wonderful event. Well, first of all, I'm a drinker, so I drink vodka, and also I'm a Republican, so I'm against deregulation, smaller government, local control. So I'm all for that. And when it comes to, that's pretty much all I have to say. Okay, but I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. So maybe some related issue, right? So I can share some business ideas. When I drink vodka, I put edible Alaskan plants there, like cottonwood catkin. It's like cottonwood flower, they're edible. Okay, I put the vodka, it tastes like chocolate or caramel. People don't know that, right? You can sell it and make a lot of money out of it. Okay, you can export to foreign countries or low 48. It's very easy. You have vodka bottle, right? And you put catkin in there or Alaska berries there. Ship it. Okay? Yeah, it's that simple. And more about alcohol. Well, people may say I have drinking problem. Well, my response is that I have drinking solution. Okay? Why? Because I don't drink and drive. Typically, when I drink at home, after work, or during the weekends. Sometimes I do drinking in the morning too. Okay, if I'm not going anywhere, then I go to bed. It relaxes me. It helps me with creativity and original ideas. Because when I drink alcohol, that's when I brainstorm and go back to the basics and think about issues and come up with solutions. So as long as people can regulate their drinking is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and our final candidate is Loy Thurman. Mr. Thurman, you'll be answering question number 7. If elected, how will you fix the state's budget and how will you fund it?
Well, I'd say you've given me the most difficult one of all the questions to be able to deal with. Thank you for being able to be here tonight. Budget is a real problem because over the past, and I've heard different numbers, I've heard over the past 6 years that we've spent $17 billion. I've heard $14 billion, but what's $3 billion, when you get to Juneau? So the bottom line is there's no more reserve. They've already spent all the reserve. There's nothing else left. So the bottom line is the can's been kicked down the road and the buck stops here. So the point is you can't spend it for all the different programs. So there's going to have to be cuts, whether people like it or whether they don't. It's a simple matter. And people aren't going to be happy. And you can go ahead and you can deal with it. We can bring outside sources in to be able to do. We brought a person to be an analysis that came in. Everybody didn't like that with what she said because of the people that were surrounded concerning Dunleavy, and so they basically kicked her out and didn't listen to anything she had to say. But we could bring an outside source to evaluate some of these projects of their value. And if people can't get along and they want to say, oh, but my program is special, you can't cut it. No. But yours, we'll cut yours. Okay, we're all in this together or we're not. So the bottom line is, okay, everybody across the board, 5%, or maybe 10%, whatever it takes. We do that for a year. At the end of that year, how are we concerning our budget? Have we balanced it? If we're not, then okay, we got to cut it again. That way, everybody is in the ballgame. And it's not according to department, it's according to individuals, everybody. The department head doesn't say the janitor gets nothing, such as we had with the president of the university. I keep my $400,000 and some odd a year, but the janitor, he's going to get his cut. No, everybody cuts. Everybody cuts. So those are some solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that ends round 1 with the candidates. The next section, again, each of the candidates will be brought up in the order that they rolled the dice. And we'll be able to either, 1, respond to one of the questions that they did not get asked, or 2, rebut one of their fellow candidates' statements. So the person who rolled number 1 was Stephen Wright. Mr. Wright. And your time will start when you start talking.
Okay, so I'm going to spend my minute talking about the budget. So, first of all, with the budget, we do not need to use average earnings from the permanent fund. What we actually need, so what they did with the budget is they added the permanent fund to the budget, and then they cut your permanent funds. Basically, you're halving, you're basically cutting that part of the budget in half. For example, the permanent fund last year earned a little bit over $6 billion. If that was held over 5 years, you would have about half of that, which we need to get back to average earnings, the Hammond 50-50 plan, because the way that they're doing with this percent of market value, that's not a good deal for the people of Alaska. You're only looking at half the earnings, so $3 billion instead of the $6 billion. You're taking, of course you're going to inflation-proof it, but you're sending most of it back into the corpus to grow for future year government to pay for expenditures like Medicaid, expanded Medicaid, options like that. So we need to fix that first and foremost.
Thank you. All right, the person who rolled number 2 was Chandra McCain. Finch. Again, you'll have 1 minute to do whatever you'd like. But we prefer we would prefer you to answer either question or rebut.
All right, 1 minute. So I did not get to answer anything about infrastructure or what I would feel is really important. And in my Senate district specifically, we have a lot of farmers out in McKinsey. We have the rail extension. We have all of these things that are important to all of us, but I am an agricultural girl at heart. My family owns and operates one of the largest poultry processing facilities in the state, and we have actively been working with other farmers. We do as much as we can to get supplies from in-state, as well as making sure that our stuff is sold at Alaskan grown to restaurants, facilities, places that need that would like to use in-state. We have a serious problem with food shortage and availability in the state. What we need to do with our infrastructure is base all of these things around what we need to do to create more food and be able to be self-sustaining up here far more than what we are. I think that we learned in March how bad it actually can be.
Thank you. All right, and number 3 is Bernadette Rupright.
Question for my response. So it was hard because we really like to get our information out about everything, but I want to talk about Huhnkie Lee Road, or I just want to talk about roads. I have a little experience there. So as far as getting a Huhnkie Lee on track, it was actually stopped because the funding was taken away from Governor Walker and were put on pause, and then it was finally started up again. So that's why we're behind on that, and it's federally funded, so it's kind of difficult for us to fast track it, but I will do that any way I can. That's actually concerning the federal government. But what I want to talk about is different ways of doing it. I'm talking about the EIS, the Environmental Impact Studies. I think that we need to keep moving along with this for these projects that are actually funded, but then they're left so far behind that they have to do another EIS, and we need to actually try to realize how it is. And it's federal, but we can come up with a new way. Things do change. Thank you.
All right, Senator Wilson, you are next. 11 minutes.
Respond to the COVID question on what the legislature can do in response. I think building relationships and working with the cities, working with the great folks like the chambers can also provide a lot of information, being part of the community, be involved in the community. Monday night, going to the city of Wasilla, they've asked help with maybe extending and loosening some of the requirements with the COVID response funding. Making sure that we provide technical assistance to industries, to restaurants, to any type of industry that need help, and how to safely open, maybe help mitigate that so we don't cause a closure that's caused by government, where government's picking winners or losers. We need to keep the economy strong. We're resilient as Alaskans, and that's what I would do, is to help Alaskans continue the resiliency, which I've come to know and love. And since my minute's up, if you have any other questions, please feel free to follow me at davidwilsonforsenate.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Huhnkie Lee, you are next in the 8th position. 1 minute.
Hi. I will respond to the economic development in Matsu Valley. I agree that infrastructure development is very important, but in order to persuade federal and state governments for funding grants, we have to persuade them. So what I will do is first start with business ideas, like farming Alaskan bears and farming Alaskan berries and sell them. Okay, we have to deregulate in order to allow those farming. And then once we make a lot of money with those brand new old business ideas, then we have more juice to persuade the federal and state grant agencies. And I'm a lawyer. That's what I do for a living. I can write very persuasively. And so if that happens, I will volunteer to write the grant application. Thank you. And by the way, after this, I'm going to buy everybody drinks. Is that powerful? You tell me.
All right, thank you, sir. And finally, we have Loy Thurman. His final minute.
Well, there's so many things that we can cover, so many different issues. The bottom line is, if you send the same people who created the problem back to Juneau to fix the problem, you really have a problem. And it's almost with you because you can't figure out how to solve the problem. So, economic development, yes, but we have to cut the costs. We're already going in $1.5 billion in the hole. And at that point, even if you did the taxes from the audit that they did before, if you taxed everybody $10,000 that was a breadwinner in the family, husband and wife, it'd be $20,000. You will only produce about $500,000 to $600,000. In other words, $500 million. We're already $1.5 billion. There has to be one solution, and we're going to have to cut. It's going to be unpleasant, but you've got to do it. I mean, you don't run your family that way, so therefore, why should they be able to do it down there?
Thank you, sir. All right, well, that concludes the portion on Senate Seat D. Thanks, everybody, for your attention, and I think that all went really well with timing. Thanks to everybody for respecting our timekeeper and those time limits as well. I know it's hard. So the next, we're going to be doing all of our House candidates basically at once, and so instead of going seat by seat, we'll be going through. They all participated in the drawing as one bank of candidates. So our first candidate for the House is Jessie Sumner, and Jessie is a candidate in House District 10. So Jessie, you're responding to question 2, which is, many businesses and individuals in our community are still struggling to return to a version of normalcy due to COVID. What do you see as the legislature's role in helping Alaskans get back to business and ensure continued prosperity for the state?
Right, so no matter what happens, the long-term repercussions of this COVID situation are going to weigh on our economy, our nation's economy. The wrong approach is the approach that the Mayor of Anchorage is taking. When you put mandatory restrictions, you don't allow the flexibility that individuals and businesses can best exercise in determining how best to address risks, both the current risk situation and the measures that are most properly taken to address those. So when you have broad-based restrictions, I like to think of what happened in New York, where they, in response initially to the COVID situation, they shut down half of their subways and half of their buses. Well, that just doubled up the people that were on the remaining ones. So you create an opportunity where there can be global errors that are much greater than the individual errors would be. And I would also say that people can assess the total risk and best operate in response to that. So right now we have low cases in the mat suit. You probably don't need to wear a mask when you go out in public. You probably can participate in a lot of events. When those case counts rise, people are going to react a lot faster than the government does. We already saw a drop-off in demand for services before the shutdown. There would have been one anyway, but the government made it worse. They made the financial situation a lot worse than it had to be, whereas people were already moderating their behavior. And businesses will be able to best address the restrictions that will keep their customers safe. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So we do not have a person in the next slot. So Kevin McCabe, you'll be next. And Mr. McCabe is a candidate for House Seat 8. All right, to your question, sir. If elected, what specifically is the top economic development project in our community that you will support or promote that will create jobs and promote prosperity for our businesses and community?
So I think that there's several things. First off, we need to get rid of the regulations. We need to roll back the regulations. The permitting, it's unconscionable that it takes 10 years to permit and regulate a major project. So that's the legislator's first job, I think, is to get back roll back regulations so that we can get to some of these projects. I agree with pretty much everything everybody has said here. We need to fund connect KGB Road all the way out to Point McKenzie, Port Mac. Port Mac is obviously important. Ethan Berkowitz designated the Port of Anchorage the Port of Alaska specifically so that Alaska would focus on his port and not the Matsu port, which is actually a better port. We need to complete that project. We need to complete the rail spur so we can finish the Alberta to Alaska Railroad. Any and all of these will create jobs for us, and we need to definitely need to finish that. So keep in mind here that the government is not the solution to the problem. Ronald Reagan said it best: the government is the problem. So we need to get the government out of this. Just a small example of what the government did with Port Mac is there was a company called NPI, had this great plan, spent $11 million helping to get that port up and running, and their deal was they were going to sell wood chips and take them out of the port. And then the borough, bowing to the environmentalists, said, oh, no more cutting of wood on borough land. Cut the legs right out from under them, cost the borough $480,000 worth of taxes, shut this guy down, and now, guess what? We have a whole big problem with beetle kill spruce because the borough shut, because the government got in with the environmentalists and bowed to them, I guess. So, thank you.
All right, so our next candidate is Christopher Kirka. Mr. Kirka could not be here today and asked that we read a prepared statement instead. So what I'm going to do is read the question that was wrote for him, and then I'll read his response, and I'll be subject to the same time commitments as all the other candidates. So the question is, growth and economic development are limited by a lack of infrastructure, including access to energy, telecommunications, transportation corridors, etc. The Matsu Borough posted a 17% cumulative growth rate from 2010 to 2017. What Matsu Borough-based forward-thinking projects will you be championing from your term? Mr. Kirka's response. One thing Alaska has is a lot of land. I believe we need to open up more land to private development, especially in the Matsu Valley. Less than 1/3 of 1% of Alaska's land is privately owned. I will push to aggressively facilitate the transfer of state lands to Alaskan owners. In doing this, we will also be building more roads, which would allow for more efficient travel in our state. Additionally, I support moving the capital out of Juneau to the Matsu, where Alaskans previously voted for it to be. And that completes the statement. All right, next candidate is Lynn Gattis. And Lynn is running for House Seat 7. Article 10 of the Alaska Constitution provides for maximum local self-government and says a liberal construction shall be given to the powers of local governments. However, access points to alcohol, including liquor licenses, are regulated by the state without regard for local governments. Should first-class and home rule cities, which have active and effective enforcement capabilities, have regulatory authority over access to alcohol?
Thank you, and my answer is a simple yes. Of course, we can manage ourselves. I truly believe that government is at its best, closest to its people. We've had a challenge here in Wasilla in regards to businesses being able to come into Wasilla and be in business. I don't know if all you guys realize that we can't have a Costco because we can't have a liquor store. We can't have Olive Garden because why? because we can't serve liquor there, because we can't make that decision ourselves. Now, there's a lot of other restaurants. I just kind of picked some of my favorites. I know, but what we really want to do is be able to have those options. Look in our town, have our city council and those folks make the determination what our city can accommodate and what we can do. And I guess that's where I really have a challenge, when government tells us what we can and can't do as far as business. So again, I find that a real simple answer. I don't want to ramble on. I know I've got 60 more seconds. With that, I guess I'll talk about, as a small business person, we need to, and what many of us have talked about already here, is to cut a lot of the regulation that keeps us out of business. I don't know what's happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years, but boy, government has come into our business in a big way. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gattis. All right, so that concludes the 2-minute section for the candidates who chose to participate tonight. So now we'll move to the segment where each of the candidates can take 1 minute to either respond to a question that they were not asked or to rebut the statement of another candidate. So Mr. Kirka is actually in the first position, again running for House Seat 7. I will read his intro, again subject to the same 60-second restrictions. I'm Christopher Kirka, a third-generation Alaska, running in the Wasilla District 7 for State House. I believe in limited government, balanced budget, protecting our PFD, ending the binding caucus, and will be a leader in Juneau for the things our district cares about. I wanted badly to be at the debate tonight, but I've had several family emergencies come up today, including my parents' house burning down last night. I hope to talk to you during the last few days of the campaign and would be honored by your vote. And that concludes his comments. So coming up next is Mr. McCabe, again from running for House Seat 8.
So I actually have two of the questions that I would like to address. The first is Lynn Gattis talked about, and I talked about previously, was regulations. So the Mercator Center of the George Mason University Research reveals that the 2019 Alaska Administrative Code contains 52,572 restrictions and 5.8 million words. It would take you 3 weeks to read it. That's our bureaucracy. We need to get rid of that. One of the other things I want to discuss is the response to COVID. This is real quick. One of the best ways, I think, to stimulate the economy is to pay back the back PFD. That's a stimulus, folks. At the same time, it solves another problem. So if we paid back that money in the last 6 years, and considering the economic money multiplier effect that it has when you put money into the economy, it would stimulate the economy. We would grow businesses. We would have more jobs. And in our communities would stop the suffering. And I think that's one of the best ways to resolve the COVID crisis.
Thank you. All right, so there was a couple slots that were empty. So Lynn Gattis, you are up next. You just got comfortable. Now we need you again. Again, 1 minute to either respond to a question you were not asked or rebut a statement that you got.
So there's a couple things that I could talk about tonight. I could talk about campaigns. Boy, oh boy, they're getting ugly. I thought loud and long and hard about how I would address this in basically head on. So folks of Wasilla, I voted for SB 91. 75% of the legislature, both in the Senate and the House, also did the same thing. SB 91 was a terrible bill, and I was fortunate enough to be working as a staffer to help repeal that. I want to own the fact that yes, I voted for it. I'm here to tell you, the bad guys don't know where they don't surround around where I live and not rob me or not to deal with some of the things at SB 91. It's something that I'm not proud of, but I'll own the fact. So as folks are running around Wasilla, she voted for SB 91, she's the worst person. Well, there's a whole bunch of worse persons out there. We were duped. We did not have all the information, and I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our final minute will be spent by Assemblyman Sumner with your 1 minute either rebuttal or response to a question.
So I'll just generally answer some of these questions. As far as liquor regulations being a state issue, it really should be a local government issue. If you have the enforcement capability of police officers, then those regulations should be decided on a more local level. The state's not going to really know what's proper, and it does impede our ability to grow our economy out here. And then fixing the state's budget. The state cannot continue the operating spending that they've been engaging in. There's going to be, if that continues, taxes or continued taking of the permanent fund dividend. Those monies will come out of the MATSU on at least an equal per capita basis to the rest of the state. And that money doesn't get spent back here on an equal per capita basis. We are not better off with a statewide sales tax going to Juneau and not being spent back here than we would be with a local sales tax. I'm not an advocate of tax, but we don't want a state tax.
Thank you. Well, that ends our questions and responses. And Jessica and I were just remarking about the efficiency of this group, so thank you. So we do have some time now for candidates who would like to remain to either speak with each other or with some of our participants here. And just for our participants that are not candidates, this is a great time to come and either follow up with some of the candidates who are willing to stay or ask your questions one-on-one. So we have this room, I think, Marty, all night. I'm just kidding. Because there's drinks, right? At the bar.
Somebody said they're buying. There's only beer and wine, but you can buy, yeah.
So feel free either to stay here or to join the party across the street. But we really appreciate your attendance. We appreciate your participation. And for everyone running, we appreciate you guys just stepping forward and being willing to serve the community. It's not an easy task, and it's not an easy job. And we appreciate each one of your commitments to do that for our community and to represent each of us. So thank you, everybody, and thanks for your attendance.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate your time. This is the last candidate debate before August 18th comes around in just 5 more days. So pick up 5 of your closest friends, get them on out there, take them to the voting booth, and vote. This is one of the most important elections of our lives right now happening, and unless you participate, you are part of the problem. Again, get out and vote August 18th, 5 days away. If you're not counting today, get out there and do something about it. Don't forget to like and share this video, and also while you're at it, click the donate link down at the bottom of the screen. If it keeps popping up, I'm hoping it does. And go to politidic.com, POLITADICK, and click that donate button on politidic.com and help us grow. Every penny goes towards making sure our content expands to you. Have a great evening.